Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a whole load of articles, research notes, and basically boil it all down for you, pulling out the key insights so you get the full picture fast. Today, we're diving into, well, a really challenging situation in Nepal. It feels like a potent example of the kind of crises many places could face. You've got economic turmoil, social unrest, and this desperate need for leadership, all hitting at once.
Exactly. And our job today is to sort through the details coming out about Nepal's economy, particularly the role of their new finance minister. It's quite a story.
Yeah, it really is. We want to pull out those crucial bits of information, those nuggets, to help you understand what's going on without getting lost in the complexity. I'm ready to get into it.
Me too. Let's connect the dots and see what lessons emerge.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The sources we looked at, they paint a pretty grim picture, honestly. What's the ground reality like for Nepal's economy right now?
It sounds bad. Bad is an understatement in some ways. Imagine key government buildings, Singha Durbar, Parliament, the Supreme Court, other places across the country seriously damaged. The sources are saying this has basically wiped out the state's administrative capacity, reduced it to almost zero. Think about that. The basic ability to govern is just shattered.
Wow, zero administrative capacity. That's hard to even picture.
It is, and it's not just the government buildings. The private sector's been hit incredibly hard too. Everything from, big companies down to the smallest shops. Morale is, understandably, very low, and this is layered on top of existing problems, right? Issues that were already holding Nepal back.
What sort of existing problems?
Well, things our sources point to again and again. Persistent political instability scaring off investors, weak infrastructure, unreliable electricity, that's a big one, contradictory laws making things confusing, bureaucracy, corruption, lack of skilled workers, weak intellectual property protection. It's a long list that was already making economic progress really difficult.
Okay, so a fragile system hit by a massive shock. And I imagine the government's finances must be in, well, dire straits.
Extremely dire. Revenue collection is way off target. People aren't buying as much, economic activity is down, and there's leakage in the system too. And here's the really alarming part. The government's regular spending, salaries, benefits, subsidies, the day-to-day stuff, it's actually higher than the money coming in.
So they can't even cover running costs.
Not with current revenue, no. There's a real worry they won't be able to manage these essential payments in the coming months if things don't change drastically. Plus, expected foreign grants, they just haven't shown up. And you see all the classic signs of a recession kicking in.
Like what?
Higher bank interest rates, rising prices hitting consumption, demand for consumer goods and construction materials dropping off, industries running way below capacity. It's a tough environment.
Yeah, you can really see how all these things just feed into each other, creating this perfect storm.
Wow.
It's a sobering reminder, isn't it, of how vulnerable economies can be. It makes you think about resilience. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Amidst all this chaos, Nepal appoints a new finance minister, Rameshwar Kanal. And sources really emphasize that he's different. What's the deal with him?
Yeah, his appointment is definitely noteworthy. He's an economist, first and foremost. Got nearly 30 years of high-level experience, knows economics, cooperatives, tax, monetary policy inside out. And crucially, the sources say he understands Nepali society from its roots. He's not just an academic theorist.
Yep.
He was born and educated locally in Palpur, apparently a brilliant student. And importantly, he chose to build his career in Nepal's civil service rather than going abroad, which many bright people might do. So the perception is he's independent, impartial, capable. One source even suggested this might be the first time a non-politician, a technocrat, has held this post. So that's a big deal in a system usually run by political appointments.
A technocrat, not a politician. Interesting.
Right. And he apparently has good international connections and respect from business leaders within Nepal. They see him as an expert. This gives him a certain kind of unique standing. He's also been involved before. He coordinated a high-level economic reform commission a while back, submitted something like 500 suggestions.
500. Were they implemented?
Well, that's the implication. Probably not many of them. But it shows he's been thinking about these problems for a long time.
What kind of things did he suggest back then?
Things like prioritizing payments for work already completed before starting new projects, a real shift in policy, only allowing new projects if long-term funding was secure, reviewing subsidies based on actual impact, looking hard at concessional loan programs, even things like increasing health insurance premiums, suggesting reforms in the cooperative sector, like limiting their scope. Very practical, efficiency-focused ideas.
So he has a history of pushing for fiscal discipline. What about his actual track record? when he was finance secretary? Did he walk the talk?
Seems like it. The sources credit him with exposing major VAT fraud cases, bringing them to court. He pushed for market discipline with stock investors, basically saying, get back to trading, then we can talk, not caving to pressure. He was also key in setting up the CDSC, that's the Central Depository System, a big step for modernizing their financial markets, making things more transparent.
Okay, so modernizing and transparency.
Exactly, and standing firm against political influence. He reportedly resisted the central bank overstepping its bounds when he was on the board. Discouraged using political connections for transfers, tried to build a culture against misusing public money for personal gain.
It paints a picture of someone quite principled, quite independent.
That seems to be the consensus in the sources, yes.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When a country is in such a deep crisis, turning to someone like that, a technocrat with a track record over a typical political figure, is that a sign of desperation or maybe a new way forward? Could it be a model for crisis management? Yeah. So, given this background, this reputation for being independent and focused on reform, what are Minister Kanal's first moves? What's his immediate strategy to tackle this immense crisis?
Well, his first big policy announcement was pretty bold. He's immediately halting budget allocations for what the sources call fragmented projects Tukare Ayojana, basically small, possibly politically motivated projects without proper planning.
Halting them completely. Why?
Two main reasons given. First, they urgently need to find money for elections, which have to happen within 6 months but weren't budgeted for initially. Second, just the overall scarcity of state resources. They need to stop the bleeding. He estimates this could free up around 100 billion Nepali rupees. That's a significant chunk of change pulled from within the existing budget.
By cutting these projects.
Exactly. Cutting what he terms wasteful expenditures and reallocating money away from these, politically pressured projects. And he's been very clear. No supplementary budget. They have to work with what they've got.
Wow. No extra money, just reallocation. That takes some nerve.
It certainly sends a strong message. And his directives to his own staff echo this pragmatism. No buying new government vehicles. Use the existing ones. Work softly, collaboratively with the public and the private sector, rebuild that trust. Coordinate closely with businesses on revenue collection. He's also set up a task force, apparently, to actually go through and study these fragmented projects that are being paused.
Okay, stopping the fragmented projects, no new budget. That sounds decisive, almost like shock therapy. But you mentioned politically pressured projects. Surely cutting those off will create some political waves.
Yeah.
Did the sources mention any pushback?
They don't detail specific pushback yet, but you have to assume it's happening or will happen. Kanal's approach, though, seems to be grounded in a broader philosophy. He's quoted saying he wants to take everyone's opinion and the world experience on board to steer the economy back to safety. His bigger goals are about optimizing the country's creditworthiness and really boosting Nepal's brand equity.
So it's not just about the immediate budget hole. It's about long-term reputation and trust.
Precisely. It's a signal, perhaps, that they're serious about responsible management, which could eventually help attract investment and aid, even if it causes short-term political pain. It's a gamble on discipline.
It's definitely more than just number crunching. These actions feel like a statement about discipline, about managing resources responsibly in a crisis. You have to wonder how that plays with the public and internationally, too. Does it build confidence? But as I've touched on, the sources make it clear this isn't just an economic crisis. There's this whole other layer, isn't there? These deep societal and political issues bubbling underneath. What's the connection there?
Oh, absolutely. The connection is critical. The economic problems are happening against a backdrop of intense social frustration. The sources talk about recent waves of anger, protests, specifically mentioning angry youth leading a kind of revolution against Nepo kids.
Nepo kids, as in nepotism.
Exactly, rampant nepotism. There's this widespread resentment, apparently, against the political class for favoring their own families, these Nepo babies. Even if some protests were later seen as infiltrated, that initial anger was real. And interestingly, a social media ban seemed to act as a flashpoint, sparking chaos in Kathmandu that then spread. It suggests a lot of pent-up frustration just waiting for a trigger.
And this isn't new, is it, the political situation?
Not at all. Since the monarchy ended back in 2008, Nepal's had something like 4 elections and 14 prime ministers. Constant churn, mostly communist or left-wing parties. There's a really telling quote in one source that the leaders got tired of kings, but then immediately started behaving like kings themselves.
Oof, that's quite an observation.
Yeah. It speaks to this struggle to embed the idea that democracy means public servants, not rulers. And then there's the perception, right or wrong, that politicians get incredibly wealthy once they get into power, which fuels public cynicism, especially when contrasted with past eras.
So you have this deep cynicism about the political class, accusations of nepotism and corruption, alongside constant instability.
Okay.
How does that directly impact the economy we were just talking about?
It's identified as perhaps the biggest problem. This political instability directly hits business confidence. Who wants to make long-term investments when the government could change tomorrow, when policies are inconsistent? It affects everything. The sources really stress that political leaders need to read the smoke signals, a pretty stark metaphor, referring to the recent unrest and building damage. It implies this isn't just about balancing the budget, it's about addressing fundamental discontent,
So fixing the economy requires fixing the politics to some extent.
or at least stabilizing it. The idea presented is that for an advanced democracy to function, you need advanced governance. The finance minister, even a capable one like Kanal seems to be, needs political backing and stability alongside the prime minister to actually implement a vision and see it through. They have to tackle the financial mess, yes, but also the erosion of trust, the corruption, the instability, because those are undermining everything else.
It really lays bare how intertwined everything is, doesn't it? Economic health, political stability, social justice, you can't easily separate them. And when leaders don't live up to those democratic ideals, you see the consequences ripple through the entire system. It's a lesson that resonates far beyond Nepal. So wrapping this up, we've journeyed through Nepal's really complex crisis. We've seen the stark economic reality, the damage, the financial crunch. We've looked at the appointment of this technocratic finance minister, Rameshwar Khanal, and his very decisive, pragmatic first steps, freezing projects, focusing on fiscal discipline. But we've also seen how this is all happening against a backdrop of deep political instability and social anger, fueled by issues like nepotism and a perceived disconnect between the rulers and the ruled. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And the sources leave us at this critical moment. Will the combination of technical expertise, like Kanal brings, and genuine political, will be enough to align things? Can they restore trust, both domestically and internationally, and start rebuilding? The challenge is huge. But maybe, just maybe, if those smoke signals are read correctly, if there's a real shift towards accountability and stability alongside these economic measures, what kind of lessons, what kind of blueprint for resilience could Nepal end up offering other nations facing their own complex trials in our very interconnected world? That's something to really think about.